Write the percent as a fraction or mixed number in simplest form. 325%. Let's begin by talking about the word percent. You can break it up into syllables, per, cent, and recognize that it means per 100. So we can write this percentage as the fraction 325 over 100. To simplify this, we can use a calculator. Most calculators have fractional capabilities. This one has the button A, B over C. It looks like a mixed number. To simplify this particular fraction, you type the numerator, the fraction button, the denominator, and the equal sign. And the calculator will give us the whole number portion, and it will reduce the fraction portion into simplest form. And that's the answer. I'm going to show an alternative that some students like. To change from a percent to a fraction, you can, if you like, first change the percent to a decimal and then change the decimal to a fraction. To change this percent to a decimal, we need to recognize, since they didn't show the decimal point, that we can put one in immediately to the right of the number, immediately to the right of the 5. Then we remove the percent symbol and we move the decimal point 2 places to the left, giving us 3.25. You may recognize that 3.25 is equivalent to 3 1/4. In several situations, we could just leave this as 3.25, but recall the directions tell us to leave our answer as a fraction or mixed number. So to do that, we recognize that the whole number part, the 3, will be the same in the decimal and in the fraction form. Now we have to figure out what goes up top. Since the decimal part is 0.25, we take the 25 and we put it up top. To find the denominator, if you're comfortable with the vocabulary, 0.25 is equivalent to saying 25 hundredths. 25 hundredths tells us that 100 goes on the bottom. Alternatively, you can simply count. 0.25 had 2 decimal places, and 100 is a 1 with 2 zeros. We can simplify this on our calculator using the same button as we discussed before, or if you want to do this one without a calculator, you might recognize that 25 divides the top and the bottom evenly. Up top, we have 25 divided by 25 is 1, and on the bottom, 100 divided by 25 is 4. Shouldn't surprise us, we get the same answer either method. In 1940, the average size of a privately owned farm in a particular country was 169 acres. In a recent year, the average size of a privately owned farm in the country had increased to 435 acres. What is this percent increase? We have a formula for percent increase. It's the amount of increase over the original. Let's start by thinking about the original. Since we're comparing what a farm size is now to what it was back in 1940, 1940's value will be the original. And this says that in 1940, that the farm size was 169. So that goes on the bottom. Now we need to figure out what goes up top. It says that the farm size was 169 acres and that it increased to 435 acres, so we can subtract to find how much that increase is. 435 now, 169 back in 1940, and the subtraction gives us 266. That represents the increase of the acres of the farm. The amount of increase is what goes up top. And so we're ready to calculate that as a decimal. To do so, we divide the top by the bottom, and it gives us this result here. Now, a common mistake is to think we're done and that the percent increase is about 1.5 or so percent. But that's not correct. In order to change this decimal value to a percent, we need to move the decimal point 2 places. So we move it 2 places to the right, and we put on the percent symbol, and then we clean it up a little bit. We are still not done because the question says round to the nearest tenth. The tenth place is where the 3 is. And in order to know what to do with that 3, we look at the hundredth place, which there's a 9. And the 9, since it's 5 or greater, tells us to round that 3 up to be 4. And this is the result. So if a farm increased from 169 acres up to 435 acres, then that increase as a percentage is about 157.4%. There are 150 calories in a cup of whole milk and only 81 calories in a cup of skim milk. In switching to skim milk, find the percent of decrease in number of calories per cup. We have a formula for percent decrease. It's the amount of decrease over the original amount. Let's start by finding the original. In many problems, the timeline of the original is more obvious. Let's say something's going from last year to this year, then the original amount would be whatever it was last year. In this question, whole milk and skim milk exist at the same time, so we have to think about this one a little more carefully. It says that we're switching from whole milk to skim milk. So the original amount of calories that we drank are whatever the calories were in the whole milk. The question says there's 150 calories in a cup of whole milk, so that will go on the bottom. Now we need to find the top. It says that there's 150 calories in whole milk and 81 in a cup of skim milk. To find the amount of decrease, we'll need to subtract the two. And I'll need to make a little bit of room to do that. And the subtraction of 150 minus 81 gives us a decrease of 69 calories. And that will go on the top of our fraction. Now we need to simplify that by dividing. The top divided by the bottom. Be sure not to do the bigger one by the little one. When you're changing a fraction to a decimal, it's always the top divided by the bottom. And that gives us 0.46. We need to change that to a percent. And to do that, we move the decimal point 2 places to the right, and we add on a percent symbol. We'll clean that up, and that's our final answer. If someone switches from 150 calorie whole milk to 81 calorie skim milk, they will have a reduction of 46%. Solve. 92.5% of what number is 296? We begin by looking at the keyword of and the keyword is and looking at how they'll translate into our mathematical equation. The word of will be represented by a multiplication, which I'm using a multiplication dot. The word is will be an equal sign. Next, we have to look at how these three elements will translate into our mathematical equation. You can do them in any order, so I recommend you start with the ones that you're most confident, which is probably the 296. We just bring it down into our equation. In the middle, it says what number. Since we don't know it, in algebra, we call that x. And finally, we have to deal with this percentage. Since it contains a fraction and a percentage, and we'll want to clean both of those up to be able to work with it in our equation, I think I'll start by working on the fraction. 1/2 is the same as 0.5. So keep in mind that if the fraction was more complicated, then you could do this on your calculator, the top divided by the bottom. Now we want to change from percent to decimal by removing the percent symbol and moving the decimal point 2 places to the left. The rest of the equation stays unchanged. So we're ready to simplify that multiplication that's on the left. It gives us 0.925x. Now in our equation, we want to get x by itself. So we'll divide both sides by the coefficient of x. The 0.925s that are on the left will both cancel each other out. It leaves just x on the left. On the right side, we'll want to use our calculator, the top divided by the bottom. And that's our final answer. 92.5% of 320 is 296.